Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,649 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. Well, for today's episode, I had the thought of system sellers, specifically games that made me go out and buy the system the games were for. Now, there will be some exceptions here, as well as there will be some omissions, but if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Alright, so before we get started, there are 3 systems I have to mention that did not have system sellers for myself, because I was too young and the systems more or less just appeared in my life. So the first would be the NES. So the NES I've had since I could remember. I know we actually got a second NES for myself that came with Mario Brothers, not Super Mario Brothers, but Mario Brothers. But that was, I wouldn't call that a system seller because I already had the system. I knew I wanted to get another one so I could play it by myself. The next system is the Game Boy. I don't remember getting a Game Boy. We ended up getting 2 of those as well. I want to say that was much more on my older brother, who really liked the idea of portable gaming. But once we got it, we weren't all that satisfied with it. And then the third one would be the Genesis. So the Genesis just showed up. I had no idea the Genesis was a thing. I was loving the NES, and then before I knew it, my brother had a Genesis. And I want to say we were playing Altered Beast on that, and that's when we got to... we got it before Sonic was a thing. So those 3 systems don't really count because I didn't have a specific game or a specific hype I was looking forward to. So the first system that would count would be the Super NES. And of course, like many people, the Super NES had a little game called Super Mario World coming out that was packaged with the system that my older brother and I were reading about in Nintendo Power. It looked amazing. We loved Mario Brothers. We loved Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2 and Super Mario Brothers 3. Like I said, I've never been a fan of the original Super Mario Brothers, but he loved that one too. And this just looked like Super Mario Brothers 4, but with new abilities, with a whole new map, the ability to save the game. And so we really wanted to get it. So not only is this the only time in my life where we bundled up games to sell them, but it's also the first system I remember taking an active part in buying, as well as the first system that I was sold on buying. Because it wasn't just Super Mario World. There was a new Zelda coming out for it that was previewed, that we knew about. So there was the hype of a new game coming out as well. And we traded in both Game Boys, all our Game Boy games, and a handful of NES games. And I'm not sure how the horse trading went down, but when we got the system, I don't know if my brother went to Funko Land or I don't remember the details. I was like 4 or 5 right now, bear in mind. Probably 5. And so when he came back with the system, we actually got to keep one of the Game Boys and a copy of Tetris. So, and that's still, I still have that today. I still have that copy of Tetris and that Game Boy. And we had a ball playing Mario World. We shortly picked up F-Zero, and down the line got, so the Street Fighters, the Contra 3, all the good stuff on the Super Nintendo. One of my favorite all-time systems. So that was the first system seller I had. The next one after that was, of course, the successor to the Super Nintendo, which was Nintendo 64. And I probably was going to buy the Nintendo 64 regardless of the software because I was a through and through Nintendo fanboy. But they showed a game called Super Mario 64 alongside a game called Pilot Wings, which I did want to get Pilot Wings as well, but it was nowhere to be found. I couldn't pre-order it, but for Mario 64, I managed to find some. I still don't remember what this store was. It was in the Hillsdale Mall. I couldn't pre-order it from Toys R Us. I couldn't pre-order it from KB Toys, but there was this weird, I don't know if it was an import-export place. I don't even know how we found the damn thing. I think my dad found it, and we went in there and threw down the couple $100 to pre-order it, and they didn't even give me the ability to pre-order the game. I just pre-ordered the system. And it was supposed to come out, I want to say in August of 1996. I think. And suddenly, around June, we got contacted by the importer-exporter, whatever the hell this place was, and they said, oh, hey, we actually can get you there's actually going to be a $50 discount on the system, and you're going to get it 2 months early. Would you like to get Mario 64 to cover that price difference? Because there wasn't a game included. This was the first system that didn't include a game that I could remember up to that time. And of course, when my dad told me this, I said, hell yeah, let's do that, because I didn't know how I was going to get the game. It was sold out everywhere. And so I ended up getting, I can't confirm this, I don't know, but I can swear I got the N64 at least a month or two early with Mario 64. Could never find Pilot Wings. I want to say the next game I ended up finding was either Wave Race 64 or Cruisin' USA. But man, I mean, Mario 64 doesn't really need an explanation. This was one of the first forays I ever had into 3D, and it was so impressive, and also it was mine. So I bought the system with my money. I saved all year for it, and I felt so cool showing off to my older brother and my dad when I was playing this, knowing that that's right, that I made this happen. How cool is that? You know, you guys always brought all the systems. The NES popped up, the Genesis. Now I'm popping up with the N64 with the most visually impressive game ever made at that time, with this cool three-pronged controller that, yeah, people say is weird, but at the time it was incredible, and I still think it was a great controller design. So Mario 64, the reason why I got an N64. Now, after that, we're looking at the PS1. So I held off on the PS1 for a long time. PS1 came out in America in 95. I did not end up getting one until 98, and what finally broke the dam on that was the N64 had a content drought its entire run. Compared to the NES, Super NES, yeah, I think the NES was 800 games, Super NES was about 800 games. The N64 had a little over 200 in North America, or maybe under 300 in North America. So, and they lost a lot of their big support. They lost Squaresoft. They lost a lot of Capcom support, Konami support. They all went to the PlayStation because CD technology was easier to make and cheaper. And a game that finally hooked me, I don't remember why I got a subscription to Game Informer or PSN, or I just, at the time I was 12. Yeah, so I was getting older. I wanted to know about the gaming scene. I wasn't just, of course I was a Nintendo fanboy still, but I was hearing, my buddies were playing these other games and these more violent games. And the game that really drew my attention, I've said it before, was Resident Evil 2. So I saw a preview for this. I want to say it was a few months out, and I had to get a PS1 so I could play this. So I bought the PS1, but Resident Evil 2 wasn't out yet. However, there was a demo available that came with Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut. So I bought that. And I also bought Star Wars Masters of Terrasakai because there was a freaking way to play as slave girl Leia in it. Yeah, those were my first two PS1 games. And then eventually I did get to Resident Evil 2. Had a great time. Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy 7, all the good, Gran Turismos, a lot of the solid PS1 era games. Really enjoyed, and I wouldn't have gotten there had it had not been a combination of things, if not in Metal Gear Solid, of course, a combination of things, not having much content to play on the N64. At that point, Ocarina of Time was a long ways off, and I was kind of getting over the glut of racing games and things of that nature. And the photorealistic, at the time, the photorealism of the pre-rendered backgrounds and the just kind of the adult nature of the games really appealed to me. And so that's what led me getting a PS1. And I loved it. And then after the PS1 era, the next big systems to come out, you had the PS2, GameCube, Dreamcast, Xbox. So Dreamcast was the earliest of all of them, and I really was not planning on getting a Dreamcast. Sonic Adventure looked okay. Code Veronica, I loved Resident Evil, but I kind of had been having my fill of it because I'd already played 1, 2, and 3, and I didn't want to buy a system just to play another Resident Evil game. But then, surprise, surprise, I still kind of think about how funny it is that this game sold me on the system, which no one really talks about. I see it's people who know about it give it a lot of praise, and that is Dynamite Cop, which is an arcade game that's actually the sequel to Die Hard Arcade. And you know what's funny? There's actually a third game in the series that only came out in Japan too, which we'll talk about in a sequels episode. But yes, Dynamite Cop. I really enjoyed this. It was a beat 'em up. At the time, the beat 'em up genre was really dying, or if not dead. Everyone was going to the full 3D model, which just didn't really translate that well for beat 'em ups. The last one I had seriously played was Streets of Rage 2 and Streets of Rage 3 on the Sega channel. And for some reason, Dynamite Cop just really appealed to me in a way. I don't know if it was just maybe it had that Die-Hard DNA, or the fact that you could use weapons in addition to using beating things up. So I did buy a Dreamcast, and this was this was the first game I bought outside of Sonic Adventure, and I really enjoyed it. I never was really good at it, though. I don't think I've ever beaten it myself. And it's still one of those ones that if I ever want to get some street cred on the Dreamcast, I talk about Dynamite Cop, because it's really a really solid game. And like I said, and one that I'd love to see get ported onto something else. I don't know if it ever has. I think it's just on the Dreamcast, and it's really fun. It's a really solid 3D beat 'em up, as many of those as there are out there. But the systems that did really get their hooks in me, of course, the GameCube. So once again, still Nintendo fanboy. Eternal Darkness had been delayed to the GameCube. Resident Evil 0 had been delayed to the GameCube. And Dinosaur Planet had been delayed to the GameCube. So a lot of things were making me want the GameCube, but the launch lineup was surprisingly decent, if I remember. And the 3 games that I wanted out of the launch lineup, which I think I got all 3 of these at launch. So I bought the system, and I bought these 3 games. And one of them was, I was so stoked that Luigi's Mansion, he was finally getting his first main game where it was all about him. It was a little unorthodox, more like a Ghostbusters game, but still, probably still my favorite in the series. It is just self-contained enough to be enjoyable. I like the one location. It's not level-based, and it doesn't lose the focus like I feel 2 and 3 do. So I had to get that. At the time, I still was invested in the Star Wars universe, and I had missed Rogue Squadron on the N64, but Rogue Squadron 2 looked really damn good. And this is still one of the best looking games on the system. I can't express that enough. This one was so good. Yeah, we had Shadows of the Empire where we did the Battle of Hoth, but you do it again in here and it's even better. You have the ability to unlock so many different starfighters, the A-Wing, Y-Wing, B-Wing. You can play as TIE fighters, I believe. There's even hidden things in this that I believe are tied to the time of day. I remember the Naboo one fighter. Like, there's stuff in this that's being unlocked that I still didn't know until this day. And had a lot of fun with this one. And the last one, which I talked about it last episode, ended up being a bit of a disappointment, was Wave Race Blue Storm. Huge fan of the N64 Wave Race, and so I had to get this. So those were the 3 that sold me on that system. The PS2, on the other hand, I was not sold on immediately. Now, that came out in 2000. I had just bought a Dreamcast. I probably regretted it, to be honest. I should have got the PS2 instead of the Dreamcast, but they got me. They got me with that Dynamite Cop. And the thing the PS2 had going for it was it had a new technology built in called a DVD player. And this was when DVD players were still hundreds and hundreds of dollars, at least $300-400. I think a cheap one was still like $150-200. Like, it was nuts back then. And that was for one that wasn't even progressive scan. It might have just been AV. And so the PS2 came out, and what's funny is I bought Metal Gear Solid 2 for the PS2, and I could swear that I had that copy of the game for months, like 4 or 5 months before I got, and maybe even longer, I feel like it was longer, before I got an actual PS2. But the game that I had to have bought in the system for was Grand Theft Auto 3. What makes this weird is that Grand Theft Auto 3 came out a month after Metal Gear Solid 2. I think it came out in November 2001. And for the life of me, I know I didn't get it I know I didn't get the PS2 for Christmas. That would have been too soon. So it had to have been for my birthday. And what happened was that my parents bought me a DVD player, because I did want a DVD player. But it was one of those things where they spent maybe $50-100 on a DVD player. And I just said, what are we doing? We should return this, because I also didn't have a good place to put it in my room. We should return this. I'll throw down the rest of the money to get a PS2, and then I can play these games I have. So that's what we did. And originally I thought it might have been Burnout 3 that made me buy the PS2, but that came out much later. So it had to be Grand Theft Auto 3. And so this was one of those games where you heard about it. The word of mouth spread like wildfire, where it came out and then everyone was talking about it. And this was before the internet was super prevalent, and forums and YouTube videos, things like that. This is 2001. So I want to say I got it in 2002, and just the ability, it was like Driver, where you could go anywhere in the world, but unlike Driver, you could get out of the car and you could take another car and you could get onto these massive chases just for the fun of it. And then you could escape, or you could find secret things, or you could collect cards. Like, it wasn't just about going through the story. And that was a really novel concept back then. So I have to think this is what led to me finally pulling the trigger on a PS2. And I loved it. I had a great time with GTA 3. And I know it had to be before Vice City came out, because when Vice City came out, I want to say my brother bought it, and I played his copy. So I never actually bought Vice City. I still, to this day, do not have Vice City on the PS2, which I should. But yeah, GTA 3 has to be what led to me buying a PS2, even though I bought Metal Gear Solid 2, but it didn't make me pull the trigger yet. Alright, so now into the PS2 era, we're getting to me going to college. So in college, the systems that came out were the Wii, the Xbox 360, and the PS3. You also had the Nintendo DS. Now before this, I got a Game Boy Advance. Now, to this day, I don't know why I got a Game Boy Advance, because I didn't buy it for Super Mario Land or Super Mario Advance, I think is what it's called, the first one. I did get the game, but that's not why I bought the system. I feel like I bought the system on pure hype. I made a mistake on the Dreamcast, and I'm like, alright, I made a mistake there. I wanted to play something new. Let's get the Game Boy Advance. It has to be great now. There's no way it's not going to be backlit. It wasn't. It wasn't backlit. I bought the Game Boy Advance, and I know I bought Link's Awakening DX, and I got Mario Advance, and I played both of them, but it didn't really, I don't feel like I bought the system to play those, just like I bought Zelda Oracle of Ages, but I feel like I didn't buy a system to play those, and it was a huge disappointment for me. But I did buy a PC, so this is where, in order to play World of Warcraft, I built a PC. Now, before that, I had played The Sims on a bunch of really bad computers. One so bad that I had to hit record, or I had to hit save every 10 minutes just for fear of the thing crashing, which led to me being a great editor because I have that same fear of the program crashing. I always hit record. But I built a computer from the ground up with the help of my college friend CK to play WoW. I bought the CPU, the tower, the power supply, the hard drive, all that stuff. And that lasted me a good 3 years and my entire original Vanilla WoW Burning Crusade lifespan until the computer died. And when the computer was getting to its last legs, when I was getting towards the end of Burning Crusade and I was kind of getting over the system, by that point there had been enough games that I was interested in. So it was a game called Dead Space that I really wanted to try out. I know it was on the 360 and it was on the PS3. Assassin's Creed, I knew it was on both. And then there was a game called Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4, which, it's funny, it's hard to think of this now that the idea of having a loadout in your game is a novelty. But up until then, a lot of it was stylized on the Halo, the GoldenEye, the Quake, the Doom, where you would find the items in the arena and they would spawn in that area. But Call of Duty Modern Warfare was the first time where you ever had a loadout where you would always have your desired gun. And that was very appealing at the time. Now, it's not my favorite. I wish the whole industry hadn't gone that way. I still do prefer finding the weapons and having to deal with not always having your optimal loadout. Because I feel like that's the sign of a better player. It's a lot easier to just be excellent at one thing instead of having to always adapt yourself. But I digress. But Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 had to be one of the main reasons why I wanted to get an Xbox 360, because unlike Halo, where you could play it at your buddy's house, Modern Warfare 4 would not let you play online unless you had your own dedicated system and your own dedicated Xbox Live. Because like I said, I wanted to play Dead Space, but that's not why I bought the system. And I wanted to play Assassin's Creed, but that's not why I bought a system. It had to be Modern Warfare 4, which I bought the damn thing on eBay of all things, and it came with a copy of Assassin's Creed, a couple of other games, and I can't remember what else. And then Oblivion was another game I wanted to play too. But this is where it's funny. I remember the system sellers from when I was younger far more than when I was older. And that goes into the next system we're going to talk about, which is the PS3. So the PS3 I did not get until late in the life cycle, super late, until 2012. And even then, this was a gift that Jen bought me when we were dating. Because the PS3 was always super expensive. When it came out, it was like $600 for a desirable one. I remember when my buddy David got one, it was like, wow, you got a PS3, that's crazy. because it was so expensive. But the two things I wanted to play the most on it, where I always knew I wanted one, was God of War 3. I was a huge fan of 1 and 2. And then the other thing was the Uncharted series. So the system I think that Jen got me was the Uncharted 3 system, and then I had to pick up the dual pack. And there were other games too, the infamous games, and then a little game called The Last of Us came out shortly, maybe a year after I got the PS3. But it was nice getting to go through and beat that catalog for what I'd been wanting to do for all that time. But it still technically was never a pull for me to go out and buy them. Like, it was one of those things where I knew I could wait and get it when it was cheaper. And, you know, thanks to Jen, I didn't have to wait all that time. So, I did mention the Wii, I did mention the Xbox, and did mention the DS. That's because none of them had games I really wanted to play. It's funny, is the Wii, I bought Smash Brothers Brawl, like I bought Metal Gear Solid 2, but I never ended up buying a Wii. And you think I would have bought one for games like Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, but everyone had one. That's the funny thing, is everyone had one. People you wouldn't expect had a Wii. Like I said, my old little brother had one. My college roommate had one. Everyone and their mother had one. So it was one of those things where I really didn't have to buy one. And that's also part of the reason why I feel like I fell off the Mario Kart train, because I did not really play much of Mario Kart Wii, which then, in my opinion, built into a lot of the stuff that's in Mario Kart 8 that I'm just not a huge fan of. But a system that did get me was a handheld that I had no interest in because I didn't buy the DS, but the 3DS announced a game that there's no way I couldn't purchase one or get one. And once again, I didn't purchase it. Jen did. Jen actually went out and bought me one and bought herself one. I know, she's really, really a gem. And that is Zelda Link Between Worlds. So I've said over and over again, Link to the Past is my favorite game of all time. One of my favorite games of all time. It's just a freaking excellent game. And Link Between Worlds is a sequel that takes place in the same the same map, essentially. And it really is Link to the Past 2. It does such a good job of honoring the first game while making its own path. You have Hyrule and Lorule. You have a cool gimmick, because at this time Zelda games are all about the gimmicks. And it's funny, I don't give it enough credit because it's almost an extension of Link to the Past. It's so good, but it is its own game, and I probably should put it higher on my Zelda hierarchy. It just kind of gets swept under the rug, and one of the games that I'd love to see this get the Nintendo Switch re-release treatment, because that would do gangbusters, and I feel like a lot more people have to experience this game. But yes, it made me get a 3DS before the game was even out. And it's funny, there was a game called Fire Emblem Awakening that at the time, the last one I played was Radiant Dawn, and I didn't enjoy that much. And so I played Fire Emblem Awakening while waiting for Link Between Worlds, and I put maybe a little 90 something hours into that game, and luckily the rest of the world did too, and saved the whole franchise. And then moving on to the Wii U. So I always knew I was going to get a Wii U, because after I skipped the Wii generation, I kind of felt like I had to redeem myself and support Nintendo again, especially because the Wii U was not doing all that well, but it also wasn't doing that much to make me want to get one, until they came out with Super Smash Bros. 4, or Smash Bros. Wii U. And it had a giant roster, had just a really cool look, allowed you to still use the GameCube controllers, and had these things called amiibos that we all fell for the damn amiibo hype. And I still remember to this day when I went to Best Buy and I saw on the shelves the Wii Fit Trainer, the Villager, and most importantly, the 4-player GameCube adapter. And I didn't pick up the GameCube adapter because at the time I didn't have a Wii U. Well, I ended up having the money to buy a Wii U shortly after that, and no GameCube adapters were in sight. And once again, Jen to the rescue, managed to find me one for Christmas, but it took a long time. And notice that little dangler there, that's the Wii U GameCube adapter, which cost me an arm and a leg for Christmas. I say me, it really wasn't me, it was Jen Magic. And found me a Marth amiibo, which I never saw. I never once saw a Marth amiibo on the shelves. And she went to Herculean efforts to find that. So yeah, kind of ridiculous. Alright, so then after that, the next system I had to decide on was if I was going to get a PS4 or an Xbox One. Because once again, this is when I was finally making money at Acura, and I could actually afford things. That's part of why it was so lean for after 2008 till 2014, is because I was pursuing the acting, wasn't making much money, and I had to rely on essentially borrowing games or the generosity of my girlfriend, which was ridiculous. So I ended up picking the Xbox One, and that was because of this game, Titanfall, which I've talked about before. Huge disappointment. I cannot express how much I fell off the first-person shooter scene, the competitive online scene, and Titanfall was a big piece of that. And I am so bummed with everything related to the Xbox One. If I find, like, I think I have Dark Souls 2 on the Xbox One. I have Final Fantasy 15 on the Xbox One. I have Doom Eternal on the Xbox One. And all these are games I haven't played. And it irks me because I've had so much issues with the Xbox One. The first time I ever went to use the disk drive, the thing didn't work. And then in recent years, the Wi-Fi stopped working. So the only way I can get updates or things of that nature is by hardwiring it into the internet, which is downstairs, and it's just a big pain in the ass. So I need to get a Series X so that I can play these things. But even then, it's just, there's no reason to get a Series X. They don't have any exclusives. Now, a funny one is the reason why I got a PS4. Now, I always knew I was going to get a PS4, especially after the Xbox One was so disappointing. The Order 1886 got me close, but not enough. No Man's Sky definitely had me interested, but not quite. The thing that made me get a damn PS4 was Destiny. And not for the reason you think. So when the PS4 originally came out, it only came out in black. And they announced a Arctic White bundle that was to come out with Destiny. And at the time, it looked like a match made in heaven. Because I usually buy systems on launch, I normally don't ever get the chance to get these special editions. And I thought, perfect. I can get Destiny with that. I have my buddy Ryan. I have my buddy Sean who's going to have it. We can all play together, have a strike team. And that's what I did. And I picked up the Destiny bundle because of the Arctic White console. So it really wasn't because of the game. I was kind of interested in Destiny, kind of not. It was another one of those FOMO games where I really was not that interested, especially because I was very much over the first-person shooter scene. But it was Bungie. I really enjoyed Halo Reach before that. I hadn't played anything from Bungie for quite some time. And I did have a good time with Destiny. I will say I did have some enjoyable times with Destiny until you get to the light cap and it was just like, oh wow, this is just like playing WoW again, but not as enjoyable. And a little bonus one is I did end up buying a PS4 Pro. Partially because my white Destiny console started having some critical errors where it would auto-eject the disc without doing anything, which was a kind of a known issue with the first runs of the PS4s before they added manual buttons. There'd be a little rubber stopper on the bottom that would heat up and I think melt or distort and then start forcing the touchless system to auto-eject. And so all day long I would just hear beep, 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 beep. And it's funny, because of that issue, I never ended up playing Monster Hunter World. I had it all ready to go. I was getting ready to do it. This was for the backlog series of games in 2018, and then it just didn't work. But it did lead to me pre-ordering a PS4 Pro that was coming out with God of War. So I didn't have a reason to get a PS4 Pro, but once my PS4 stopped working, and it was out of warranty, I'm like, well, might as well get the Pro, especially because I get this cool God of War controller right here, and I get the cool God of War system. And that's how I ended up getting a PS4 Pro. And not really for God of War, but kind of for God of War, because I wanted the cool ships and shies, you know? Really nice. Alright, getting down to the last few. So the Nintendo Switch was coming out, and once again, I'm a big Nintendo fanboy, and there was nothing going to stop me from getting that system, but when they announced that it was coming out day one with Breath of the Wild, there you go. Done. Hook, line, and sinker, done. Had to pick it up. I ended up picking up Breath of the Wild for the Wii U as well because I pre-ordered it at the time. I was not certain I was going to be able to get a Switch, which I ended up getting the gray Joy-Con Switch instead of the red and white because I couldn't find the red and white, but it was also like I found a damn Switch, take what you can get. Play Breath of the Wild. I've talked about Breath of the Wild before. Amazing game. What a great way to start off the system, and what a great system the Switch has become. When that Switch Pro comes out, I don't know. Who knows? You know, we've been speculating about it for 6 years. Maybe the second one will come out, which the Switch Focus or whatever the hell they're calling it. I don't know. The speculation stuff on the Switch is one of the most annoying things out there, in my opinion. But one thing that is not annoying is the thing that allowed me or led to me getting a PS5. Now, besides just finding one, because that was more of an issue than anything, I likely would have bought a PS5 on launch if I could have. I tried to, but the thing that finally made me need to get a PS5 was the game Returnal. So I love a game called Furi, which is a boss rush mode where you're kind of in a bullet hell, but then you get into this one-on-one fighting scene and you avoid projectiles and all that. And my buddy Archer told me that Returnal was very similar to that, but then you're dodging, and also I think Rewind Mike said the same thing. You're dodging these projectiles in real time, and it's a shooter, but it's not quite a shooter, and it's just it's a roguelike and just very fun game. I haven't gone through and gotten the true ending just because it does wear on you after a bit. It is one of those things where it has a shelf life, and I've never done Pandora's Tower, I believe it's called, but Returnal, well worth buying the PS5 in my opinion. Still the best exclusive on the system, which I'd say, I don't know, Final Fantasy 16 is pretty damn good too, to be honest. But for the time, Returnal was more than enough reason to buy the system. And I guess this one's just for shits and giggles. So I learned in my collecting life that there was a Castlevania that came out that was super sought out, that never came out in the West in an official capacity, and that was Rondo of Blood. I picked up the TurboGrafx CD version of it, and I never had a reason to play it, and I never had a way to play it, because the Turbo Duo, the CD system, super expensive. Well, lo and behold, earlier this year, I bought a analog Duo so that I could finally play this bad boy. Now, I have the TurboGrafx Mini, which allowed me to review the game, God, a couple of years ago. But now, I'll finally be able to play my actual copy, and I'm looking forward to that. So that's just a little bonus one. And there you go! Those are the system sellers for me throughout my life, through every generation. And let me know what games were system sellers for you. Like I said, some of them are a little bit more of amalgamations. Some of them, you know the game. Like Resident Evil 2 is probably the most definitive one that made me buy a system I had no intention of buying. Dynamite Cop's that way too. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this. Like I said, I release a new video every Tuesday. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support me. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We are almost to 1650. Hopefully by the time this video goes up, we'll be at 1650. My goodness, that is insane. At the beginning of this year, I want to say I was still in the 1400s. So the fact that we have a real shot of getting to 1700 by the end of the year is mind-boggling. So once again, thank you all so much for checking out the videos, coming here every Tuesday, watching the old videos. It really does mean the most. I love every single one of you, and I hope to see you again soon, all right? It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.
When you drive your new Acura, 10 years from now, you'll look back on fondness at this ad when it led you to your Acura. You're still driving it.